welcome back to another Scare You Wary episode. I'm Avery, and I'm Lashing Eye Lucy. And today, we're finishing up this month of January for Scare You Wary by looking at what seemed to be sort of the last puppet-oriented horror movie in HBOMax's lineup. And that one is PuppetMaster. In a word, it was very weird. Yeah, that's a good way to sum it up. I don't even know where to begin with this one. There was a lot of things happening. I think things were happening. Well, try and put it together the best you can. So from what I understood is PuppetMaster is about some kind of ritual that brings inanimate objects to life. Yes, and the last person that had this gift was a puppeteer. So he made really cool little ceramics. In the opening of the movie, we see this really old guy with all of his little puppet children, and it looks like that some people are trying to come and get him. We find out later it's because they want to know the secret of his gift and how to gain the immortality, because supposedly you could get immortality by bringing inanimate objects to life. Go figure. I don't know anything about that. But then it was a bit hard to follow, because then we completely jumped to like this carnival thing and this carnival lady's gypsy kind of person. Fake gypsy, more like it, yeah. But this fortune teller looking woman starts going on about all this weird spooky stuff with this young couple. And at first I thought it was the couple we were going to focus on, that somehow they would tie into the story. But no, it was the fortune telling lady that tied into it. Yeah, I spent the first half hour of the movie sitting back and trying to figure out how the first two opening scenes correlated with the rest of the movie. It felt like we had three different movies at the start, and none of them tied into each other. And they had to have one of the characters tell. They had to have one of the characters explain what on earth the two opening scenes were even about for any of us to understand. So very, very confusing start. Yeah, not the best thing to do if you have to have one of your characters explain what you were just trying to show. Not a good move there. But once we start the actual storyline of the film, it gets a little more interesting. What it comes down to is you have this group of friends with supposedly supernatural powers. So you got the fortune-telling lady, you got this crazy, seducing, loving couple, and then you've got this guy that supposedly senses the future in his dreams, but he's pretty straight-laced, which means he's the one that survives. Yeah. And what happened is this other person that they used to work for recently passed away, so they're all kind of going to pay their respects and also to find out if he managed to find how to get immortality, this special spell that brought inanimate objects to life. He has a widow that he left behind that is in charge of this whole hotel place where all of the former supernatural friends stay at. And in the midst of all of that, there are the tiny puppets from the beginning are running around killing everyone. Because that's what the guy, the one that's supposedly dead, wants them to do. Basically, he gained the immortality, faked his own death, and, well, he had real death, but then somehow he gained immortality from dying. And then he sends all the puppets off to kill his friends because he doesn't want anyone else knowing the secret. And also because he wants to experiment on humans more with the immortality thing or something along those lines. I think it was more he just wants to bring them back to life, because if you bring an inanimate object to life, then they're kind of your slave to a certain extent. At least I think that's what I got from it. Yeah, the rules of this universe are kind of not, they're detailed, but there's pieces of them that don't make sense, especially as the story goes on. There are things that happen that don't make a ton of sense. So it's one that, if you think about it too hard, it just gets more confusing. But there was one part, several parts that I really liked, and that was for actually the deaths that the little puppets would do, the little murders going on. Those were actually kind of creative, kind of gross as well, so that's what made them really cool. Yeah, I didn't like that part. Well, you don't like any of the killing scenes. Yeah, fair enough. But Lucy's right. They were at least kind of creative because each puppet is kind of styled differently. And that is the way that they kill in a very specific way. You've got this puppet that is more like a stop motion puppet with kind of human looking hands. And that one is able to strangle people. You got one with kind of a curly spinning drill point for a hat on its head. So you can guess what that puppet would do with that. Yeah, you got this really weird one that barfs up leeches, I think it was. I thought it was a beetle at first, but they were all weird and bloody. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they were leeches. That was probably the weirdest one. How do you get leeches inside of you? And more importantly, the leeches aren't going to necessarily kill you. I mean, it won't be pretty, but I don't think you can die from leeches. You would need a ton of leeches, more than the movie had, yeah. But you get the idea. The puppet parts in their murder scenes were really creative. And then you've got a little guy with like this little hat. He's kind of a spooky looking character, and he's got like a knife for one of his hands. So yeah, all of the puppets were pretty creative, and the ways that they killed people were pretty creative too. But that's about the most I can say for what I liked about the film, honestly. Yeah. So with a storyline as crazy and wild as this, you'd think that, you know, there's so much going on, it would be all in your face and super fast-paced, but it was surprisingly slow. It was so slow. It was kind of painful. For something that felt like there was a lot of story, it just kind of dragged on and on. There were a lot of scenes that were slow and somewhat silent. I think they were going for an intense feeling, but it just felt more tedious and drawn out. Yeah, I caught myself yawning a couple of times during the quote-unquote build-up scenes, which is never a good thing. You don't want your intense scenes to have your audience yawning, wondering when you're going to get to the scary part. And a lot of that movie was kind of that build-up too, and the fact that the intensity and build-up just didn't work at all for this movie just made it drag on even longer. Yeah, there wasn't really not much good stuff to write home about with PuppetMaster. Well, the overall idea was interesting. It's just the execution was so slow. Yeah, slow and painful. If it was done a little bit quicker and there was a little bit more detail in sort of showing all of these things and the circumstances, then, you know, there's some potential there. It's a creative idea. It just was not executed well. I think this was technically the first movie of Scary Wary this year that we both didn't really like. Well, it was bound to happen. You got that whole lineup. You've got all of the Leprechaun movies in that HBOMax lineup. Why? I refuse to watch those. You hear me? We are not watching those. Even if someone puts them in the comments, we are not doing it. Lucy won't do it. You'll be on your own if you do that. Okay, good to know. So with that ends off the month of January for Scare You Wary. But don't worry, because next is February. And February rhymes with Scare You Wary. So we will still be making some reviews of scary movies from HBOMax's lineup. Yep, and like Lucy mentioned earlier, feel free to comment below movie suggestions that you want us to see. At this point, we've pretty much kind of covered anything that might be remotely related to bleh. But what was I saying? Something about being related. Oh, right. We've done everything that we could find that was kind of remotely related to puppetry in the horror section. So at this point, it's just going to kind of be pulling out of a hat and then watching whatever is on that. It better not be the Leprechaun movies. I refuse! No Leprechaun movies! Well, until next time. Do you hear me, Avery? No Leprechaun movies. Yes, I heard you. No Leprechaun movies. None of them. Not a single one. Not even the first one. No Troll movies either. Oh, you mean Troll and Troll 2? Yes, and did you see they had Scooby-Doo in that lineup? Like the live-action Scooby-Doo. That's not scary. I think that one's more debatably scary. Ugh.